Do you translate in your brain when you're speaking English? Do you translate from your native language to English and then construct the sentence and then say it? I'm sure a lot of you can identify with this. I get comments and messages all the time asking about this topic, like, how do I stop translating when I'm speaking English? How do I just speak automatically and not need to think in my native language and then translate into my target language, in this case, English? How do I do that? This is something that language learners all over the world struggle with, if you want to use the word struggle. I don't necessarily think this is a struggle, but people feel like they struggle with this. Like, oh, I keep having to translate. I just want to speak automatically. So I want to talk about this topic today and give my thoughts about it. And this is going to be kind of a theoretical video. I'm just going to talk from my experience, and I'm going to give you my opinion, okay? I'm not an expert on this. I'm not a researcher in terms of the brain or languages even. I'm not a researcher, and I can't come to you with scientific evidence about all of this. But I'm a human, and humans have opinions, and I'm going to give you my opinion. So this might be a little messy, a little disorganized, like a lot of my YouTube videos are. But you guys like that. You guys like practicing your listening while I talk and just bounce around different ideas and stuff. So I'm sure you guys don't mind. And I'm sure a lot of you might even disagree with some of the things that I say here. But that's okay. All right. That's perfectly fine. Before we continue, remember to click on the little bell so you get the notifications when I release new videos so that you don't miss any of these videos, because I know you love them. I know you love practicing your listening, watching these videos. For some reason, you guys prefer seeing my face and not just hearing me talk. So that's why I continue making these videos. So let's talk about translation. When you're speaking, in your case, in English, or for anyone, when I'm speaking French or some other language that I'm learning. So let me first start with this, the more theoretical part of this, okay? So I think, this is just my opinion, but I think that there is always translation happening in your brain, even when you're speaking your native language. Okay, if you're from Brazil and you speak Portuguese, I still believe that when you are speaking Portuguese to another Brazilian person, you are actually translating in a way in your brain. Let me explain this. I don't think that we spend our whole day walking around, going about our day, thinking in our native language, okay? I know that people ask this question all the time. People talk about this all the time when it comes to language learning. It's like one of the most popular topics. How to think in English, right? How to stop thinking in blah, blah, blah language and start thinking in blah, blah, blah language, depending on which language you're learning, okay? So there is this idea that probably the vast majority of people on Earth have, which is that we think in our target language. And if you have that opinion, I respect that, and I can understand why you think that. I don't think this is the case. I don't think that our default setting is thinking in my case, English, or in your case, whatever native language you speak. I think that we can think in our target language. Obviously, all of us have done this, where we kind of think a sentence in our head, or we think about a conversation before we have it, or after we have it. We think of hypotheticals in our brain and start saying certain things. We can have conversations with ourselves in our head. Of course, we can do that. I'm not saying that we can't think in language. That's ridiculous. Of course we can. However, I don't think that our default setting is thinking in our target language. Let me give you some examples. I'm sure every one of you have had this situation at least once in your life, probably many times, where you're speaking in your not your target language, you're speaking in your native language, okay? And then you say a sentence to the person you're talking to, and then you say, wait, hold on, that's not what I wanted to say. Or, oh, hold on, that's not what I'm trying to say. Something like that. Have you ever experienced that? Why is it that that happens, right? If we think in our native language and we just say exactly what we're thinking, why is it that we can say a sentence and say, no, hold on, that's not what I'm trying to say? And then you reformulate your thoughts and try to come up with the right word. Why is that? Well, in my opinion, that's because you're thinking in this kind of mental language, I'll call it. It's not a real language. It's not a language like English or Spanish. It's just a way that your brain is thinking when you're not talking and you're just going about your day. You're not necessarily thinking the whole time in sentences in your target language. Sorry, I keep saying target language, in your native language, right? I mean, when you think about it, imagine you living your life, going about your day, and literally every single thought you had was in your native language. Like, okay, I just woke up now and I'm opening my eyes and now I'm going to turn around and now I'm going to grab my phone and let me see what is happening on Instagram. And oh, he posted this and she posted that. Let's be realistic. That's not how we go about our day. You do not have this internal monologue that just keeps on saying sentences over and over and over and over, and every single thing that you're doing with the sentence for it, right? That's just not how we live our lives. At least that's not how I live. I don't think a sentence for every single thought I have, okay? Let me give you another example. I'm sure many of you have experienced this before, where you know exactly what you're trying to say. You're talking to someone, you have the idea in your brain, and you just can't think of this word or this phrase that you want to say, but you know exactly what you're trying to communicate to the other person. You're like, you just can't get the word out or the thought out, but it's not that you aren't thinking the idea. You know exactly the message you're trying to communicate, but you can't put it into your native language, right? You can't translate it from that mental idea into your native language, okay? I'm sure that's happened to all of you. That's happened to me many times where I go, like I'm trying to express this idea and I just can't say the words, but I'm thinking the idea, right? I'm thinking it in that mental language. So that's another example. Here's one more example. How do you think young children think when they're 2 years old, for example? I've got a son who's pretty young and he can't talk really well. He's learning for sure, and he speaks Spanish better than English. And I'm trying to make sure he's working on his English every day and getting a lot of English exposure. But he definitely doesn't speak well yet. Okay, and let me back up 1 year, right? When he was 2, at that time we had great communication already, in the sense that we were able to interact really well and do many different things, but he couldn't speak English or Spanish, really. He couldn't speak any language, really, just some words and some phrases here or there. Do you think that he just couldn't think at that time? Do you think 2-year-olds just are incapable of thinking because they don't speak a language yet? So how are they going to think if they can't think in English or think in Spanish? Of course not. Obviously, 2-year-olds think, right? Even babies, in a way, think, not exactly like us, but little kids think even before they speak a language. So are you going to say that they just have no ability to think because all of us think in a language? Of course not, right? We have this mental language. As my son is putting blocks together to build something, he's not thinking every word of the sentence. Okay, I'm going to grab this block right here and I'm going to insert this little round part into the hole right there, and I'm going to stack it, and I'm going to grab the one with 3 holes and put that on the one with 4 holes. No, he's not thinking those sentences out loud, but he's visualizing that in his mental language. He's thinking that idea in that mental language in his brain. Okay? I think I've given you enough examples to show you my point here. I don't think that we think in our native language the way that most people think we do. Okay? We can think in our native language, but that's not our default setting. We have this mental language that we translate from into our native language, and we do it really fast. That's why it doesn't feel like we're translating, because we're translating like instantaneously almost, right? So we do this translation from our mental thinking, our mental language, into our native language, okay? So now let me talk about how we actually do this. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes right here. Okay, I've always got notes, especially when my ideas are all crazy like this. Okay, so when we are speaking our native language, we have certain phrases, words, expressions, even like whole sentences that are just automatic. It's like we've said those like 10,000 times already, 20,000 times, whatever it may be. And so those are just literally automatic, just poof, right? There's absolutely nothing involved there besides just the, saying of that automatic phrase. However, we also go about our day saying a bunch of new sentences that we've never said before. Think about it, right? When you have discussions with people, when you're talking about different topics, you're constantly constructing sentences that you've never said before in your whole life, right? You probably do that multiple times every day. I don't know how many times, maybe it's many times. I haven't really thought about it, but you do this constantly where you say sentences and it's the first time in your life you've ever said that exact sentence, right? But you say it correctly. Interestingly enough, even though it's your first time saying it, you say it correctly. You're a native speaker. You just put the words together and there's your new sentence that you've never said before, right? How do we do this if we've never said that before? Well, besides the automatic phrases that we already have that we could just insert in there, we also just have this knowledge that maybe might not be explicit, but it's implicit, I'll say, of the grammar, the structure, the syntax, those things that are involved in language. And so we have these kind of building blocks in our brain where maybe you can't explain it to a foreigner, like why certain rules in your language exist, or you might not be able to explain the grammar, but you kind of know the grammar just because you know these different building blocks. Like maybe you don't know anything about, let's say, unreal conditionals. Something like, if I had more money, I would do this, right? You probably don't know how to explain that super well to a foreigner who's learning your language. You might not know all the terms for all the grammar points there. However, you just know that pattern in your language, right? If I had $1 million, if I had more time, you know that it's not if I have. You just know that it's if I had. You know that structure. And because you kind of already know, not kind of, you already know that structure, you can just replace that final word with something else, right? If I had $1 million, if I had more time, if I had more energy, right? You're just using those building blocks that you already have in your brain, and you're just using them to create new sentences, right? Even if they're not as automatic as something like, I know, like that sentence that you've probably said a million times, right? I know, right? Just like that. Or how are you? You've said that a million times. That's just completely automatic. You're not making a new sentence there, but you can make new sentences pretty much automatically by using your brain's recognition of the different patterns in your own language, right? If I had, not if I have, right? In the case of an unreal conditional, right? Those patterns that your brain just knows because you've seen them tons and tons and tons of times in your native language. You have no problem using them and just inserting a new word afterwards, right? So you've got these building blocks that are from patterns that your brain just knows. And so you can construct new sentences that you've never said before. And then you have other automatic phrases that you just say all the time. So you can say those. And these are all kind of still translations from your mental language, right? You are thinking the thought in your mental processing language, whatever that is, and then you're just saying it. And sometimes it's just an automatic phrase that's already pre-packaged that you just say, like, I know, right? Or it's with your building blocks from the patterns that you know, and then you say them, right? You translate them from your mental language into your native language and say them, okay? All right, that was a ton of theory. I'm sorry if that bored you, but it's super interesting to me as a language learner, someone that's interested in these types of subjects. I love talking about this and debating about this because, trust me, a lot of people don't agree with me about this. So I'm fine with having friendly debates and conversations about these types of topics. And you might disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine. But I think that I presented my point, hopefully in a clear enough way where you now understand kind of the base of what I'm talking about here. So now let's take this and apply it to language learning. So now, not talking about your native language, but your target language, in your case, English, okay? Let's apply the same concept. Well, you're always going to be translating because you translate from your mental language into your native language already. So you're translating no matter what language you speak, but it's just a different type of translation, right? So really the question is, from which language are you translating into English? Are you translating from your native language into English, or are you translating from your mental language into English? That's the big question here, okay? So for me, and I think for most of you, the goal is to not translate from the native language to the target language. We want to translate from the mental language to the target language and skip over that native language. We don't want to have to go from mental language, native language, process, and then target language. That's what we want to not avoid, because you can't avoid that at the beginning. You have to go through that probably. But that's what we want our goal, our end goal to be, to skip over that middleman of the native language and go straight from your mental language to your target language, in your case, English, okay? So that's my goal. That's probably your goal. And I think this is what everyone is referring to, really, when they say that they want to stop translating, right? If you apply my theory about translation and mental language, really what they're saying is, okay, how do I go straight from my mental language to my target language and not have to go through my native language and do that other translation in the middle there, okay? So let me look at my notes here. What are some things that I wrote down here? So the same concepts apply, all right? The same concepts that I already mentioned before in terms of the native language. So what I mean by that is some phrases are going to be automatic, right? Even in your target language, even in English. So a phrase like, how are you, might already be an automatic phrase that you don't need to use your native language in order to translate from to get that question. You can just go straight from your mental language to your target language, English, right? How are you, right? Or if someone asks you, oh, how was your day today? You say, oh, it was good. Maybe that's an automatic sentence that you already have. It was good, right? I'm using very simple examples here, but this is just to kind of explain this idea well. But you could think of more complex examples where there's just something that you have said so many times that it's just an automatic translation from the mental language to English. You don't have to think about the structure at all. You don't doubt at all if it's right or wrong. It's just obvious that this is what you're supposed to say, right? You probably have a lot of these if you've been speaking English for any length of time, okay? If you've never spoken before, you might not have as many of these, right? But if you're already practicing your speaking or you're doing some writing, you're probably already kind of developing some of these automatic phrases and words, and that's great. Or whole sentences, right? You might just have some automatic sentences that you've just said so many times, and that's awesome. So we want to build up the amount of automatic words, phrases, and sentences that we have in our target language. That's one thing that will definitely increase our speaking ability and reduce the amount of translation you have to do from your native language, right? So that's something you just want to strive for. Just have more automatic phrases in your repertoire, right? That you're able to just say, and you can cover a wide range of thoughts and ideas with those automatic phrases, right? And so that's going to take time, but you're going to build those up, right? Just like you built up the automatic phrase, how are you, right? You started not knowing that. When you started from zero, when you started English from zero, you didn't know that question, right? But then at some point, it became an automatic question because of how many times you were exposed to it or you said it. And now you don't doubt whether or not it's correct, right? So that's an automatic phrase. We want to get a lot of those, as many as we can, and continue building more and more of those, right? That will make our speech more fluid, and there'll be less translating from our native language, right? And so that's one of the goals here. But then the other goal, the other way you can reduce that translation that we were talking about, is that you want to build up your knowledge of not just the phrases that you can say automatically, but those building blocks, those patterns that I mentioned when I was talking about your native language, right? We also just want to have a bunch of these patterns that are just really familiar to us in our brain, right? And I can use that same example of, right, if I had more time, right? Instead of just like focusing on the grammar and trying to theorize with the grammar and really do a lot of grammar work with that, if you just kind of mentally capture that, like, oh, that's how I need to express myself if I'm talking about something that's not real right now. Okay, I don't have $1 million. If I had $1 million, I don't have a lot of time. If I had more time, your brain is going to, eventually really recognize that pattern, and that will become kind of like an automatic building block for you, right? It's not the same thing as like an automatic phrase like, how are you? Because you're going to insert new words after that. If I had more time, if I had more energy, if I had more money, whatever, right? You're not just always saying the same thing, but you have this automatic pattern in your head that you can just say without any doubt about whether or not it's true. And then you can start to build on top of that, right? So you want to be building up your collection of automatic phrases and building up your collection of these building blocks, these patterns that you can reproduce like automatic phrases, and then build on top of them, because you need to change words depending on what you're talking about, right? Just like the ing. This is a very basic example, but when you first learned English, you didn't know anything about ing endings in English, right? I am talking, right? But once you started learning English and you started being exposed to words like talking, going, doing, pretty soon your brain just recognized that pattern, and now it's probably pretty obvious to most of you like what that pattern is. I am ing, you are ing, right? I'm talking, you're doing, right? And you kind of have that automatic pattern in your brain that you can just substitute words into, right? I'm talking, or I'm doing, or I'm going, or I'm walking. You can just substitute any word in there, and it's like automatic. It's almost automatic because the structure, the pattern is automatic. Okay? I think you get my point, right? So let me look at my notes here. So with that in mind, right, you want to build those things up, meaning you want to get a ton of input. You got to listen and read a ton. I've said that a million times. That's not new. That's not a new idea for any of you if you've listened to me, right? You got to be listening a ton, right? You really have to just build up your recognition of certain sentences, phrases, certain structures that will later become automatic for you. All right. It will be much more automatic if you've heard it a million times and then you start saying it than if you've never heard it before. You don't do any listening practice and you just start trying to say it and make it automatic. It'll work like that too, but it's stronger if you've already heard it many times. Okay. So you want to listen and read a ton. And of course, the other part of that is you want to have a lot of output. You want to speak and write a lot as well. This is going to make things more automatic once you've said them many times, especially because you'll realize which phrases just come up a lot in your speech, and the ones that come up a lot become the automatic ones. You're going to start just using them without any thought and without any question about the correctness of those phrases, right? Once you start having conversations, like some of these are going to become these concrete automatic phrases or patterns that you use in your speech. And that can depend on your style of speaking as well, the things you talk about, the things you like to say or whatever. So as you're speaking, you're building up automatic phrases and you're building your recognition of patterns as well. And so if you think about it, my advice is pretty simple, right? You got to do a lot of listening, a lot of speaking. And I think, a lot of you are like, well, what's the secret here? Well, the secret is to not think that translation is like a bad thing, like, oh, you have a problem. You're translating from your native language to English when you speak. No, that just means that you don't have enough automatic phrases. You don't have enough patterns in your brain, building blocks that are automatic. So you got to spend more time with English and build up a wider collection, a bigger collection of automatic phrases and structures, right? It's that simple. So I think that's kind of the moral, that's the lesson of this video, is that the problem is not that you're translating. Okay, the problem, it's not even a problem. The solution to this, if it is a problem, if you want to call it that, is that you just got to build up, like I said, these automatic things. And so you got to spend more time doing both input and output. Okay, if you're missing one or the other, this process is going to go a lot slower. Okay, if you have done a ton of listening, you feel like you have a good comprehension, and you just refuse to speak and you are not talking, or you say, I can't afford English classes or whatever your reason is, you're not going to get these automatic phrases that fast. Okay. You're not going to be able to use these patterns automatically within, a relatively short period of time. It's going to take you a lot longer. You can't neglect either of these two areas. You got to keep on doing your listening, your reading, and you got to speak, okay? Both of these things are necessary, and it's just a matter of time, Okay, so it's not a problem that you're translating. You're just going to want to translate less and less and less and less and less and less over time from your native language as you get more of these automatic phrases and automatic structures. Okay, but at the end of the day, we're all translating from this mental language. We just want to have to filter fewer things through our native language and go straight from the mental to the target language. That's really what our goal is. And so we just do that little by little as we get more automatic phrases and structures in our brain, in our speech. Okay? Let me see if I missed anything here. I think I covered pretty much what I wanted to cover. So keep on doing a ton of listening. Keep on doing a bunch of speaking. Fill in your gaps in your speech, okay? When you notice that you can't say something that you want to say, you got to find a way to say it. So you got to look it up, ask your tutor, study that phrase, correct your errors, right? If you have a pattern that you think is one of those automatic patterns, but really you're saying it wrong, then you got to get that corrected and then, make that become automatic over time as you say it correctly, many, many times, okay? So my advice is pretty basic here, but I wanted to talk just about my theory behind this and what I've noticed. And of course, these videos are for your listening anyway. So even if you don't agree with me or you wanted a different solution, at least you got good listening practice in and maybe you learned a few words. I'm curious to know what you think about this though. So leave a comment down below. Let me know if you agree with me about the whole thinking in our native language idea. Let me know if you agree with me, if you disagree. Don't worry if you disagree with me. I love hearing other people's opinions about these theoretical topics, so don't be afraid to disagree with me. But let me know. Leave leave a comment for me and let me know what you think, or if you have any experience with anything that I'm talking about here. And I want to remind you that you should start using my advanced podcast episodes if you haven't done so already, if you haven't started with that. And really, I want you to check out my US Conversations podcast, because that's going to be something that you just, that type of content is just what you need to practice with. You need to practice with conversations between two people or more people where they speak at normal speed, because if you don't do that, you're not going to become comfortable being in group settings with native speakers when there's more than just you and one other person, okay? I went through that. It was terrible. I was very frustrated with myself that I didn't start using this type of content earlier when I learned Spanish years ago. So that's why I have this US Conversations podcast now, to help people not make the same mistake I made, so they can practice listening to these types of conversations. And even if you feel like they're hard, well, your ears will become accustomed. So that content is made to help you start with that type of practice. So that link is down below, so check that out. Thank you all for watching this video, and I'll talk to you in the next one.